Welcome everybody to our Committee of Adjustment meeting. We have 10 items on the agenda this evening. First off, if you have a cell phone with you, can you please take this opportunity to ensure the ringer is turned off? And if it does in fact ring while you're in here, please don't start talking until you've left the room. Now, members of the public with a particular interest in any file this evening, please be sure to fill your name and address in on the sign-up sheets that are at the very back of the room. That's important. I'll explain why in a second. And so I'm now required to read the following notice. The notice of decision for applications we review this evening will only be forwarded to those who have either presented a written request for the decision or to those who have recorded their name and address on the forms provided at the back of the room. Furthermore, a formal request is necessary to be advised of a possible Ontario Land Tribunal hearing on these matters and in order to be allowed to make a presentation to the Ontario Land Tribunal, which is otherwise known as the OLT. So if you are following along remotely this evening and you'd like to be notified of the decision or any appeals that may result, then please send an email to our Secretary Treasurer, Lindsay Stamen. Her email address is lsthamann@cityofkingston.ca. And be sure to include your name, your address, and the file number of the application. So I'd now like to share with you the 5-part format that I'll be using as we navigate through all the applications this evening. Now, in the first part, I'll start by introducing the application. Now, if you are the applicant, please come up to the speakers area, which will be in just to my immediate right in the first section of seats. Be prepared to give your name and address for the record, and then feel free to add anything additional to the application we have before us, if you feel that's necessary. In the second step, I'll be inviting members of our committee to ask questions of either the applicant or the staff. And then in the third step, I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Now, members of the public can line up at the speaker station, which will be to my right as well, but in the second grouping of seats. And, or if you're following from home, raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And when I recognize you, please be prepared to state your full name and address for the record, and then you'll have an opportunity to make your presentation or ask your questions or make your comments in respect of the application. Each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes, and I'll be sure to give a warning at the 4-minute mark. And it'll be helpful if speakers do not repeat the same issues. So if somebody already has covered a point that you also feel is important, please don't feel compelled to repeat it. That's just not helpful. Now, during the public portion of the meeting, please don't expect an immediate response to your questions or comments, because what we're going to do is physically record your questions and comments. And it's only after I close the public portion of the meeting will the questions and comments be addressed by the applicant, their agent, or staff. I'll be calling 3 times for public comments before I close the public portion of the meeting, okay? So we're here to gather information to make a decision. We don't encourage a debate in this public forum. In the 4th step, I'll give the applicant or their agent or staff an opportunity to address those public comments. And then in the 5th and final step, I'll turn it back to the committee. I'll ask them to make a motion, and we'll deliberate on the application in this public forum. And then that's it. We make an ultimate decision. I'll be using the same format for every application this evening. So at this point, I'm going to call on our clerk, Ian, to confirm quorum. Ian?
Good evening, everyone. Through you, Mr. Chair, I can confirm we do indeed have quorum. Currently absent from the committee is Somnath Sinha. We do also have a number of members of the public here in person, and I can just confirm quickly on Zoom, give me 5 seconds, that there are 3 people in the public viewing gallery on Zoom. And happy to turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much. Okay, so I'll now call the meeting to order at 5:34 p.m. and I'll refer you to the agenda. So committee members, there were 2 addendums that came out. One was last Friday and one was today. So can I call for a motion to approve the agenda with the addendum? So moved by Vincent and seconded by Paul. And any discussion? So all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that is unanimously carried. Thank you. All right, now we are going to confirm the minutes from the October 17th meeting. Everybody's had a chance to review them. Can I call for a motion to approve the minutes? So moved by Greg and seconded by, well, it says Gary, but seconded by Blaine. Any discussion? So all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that would be carried. That's unanimous. We have no delegations and no requests for deferral, and we have no returning deferred items. So the first piece of new business is an application for minor variance for 597 Davis Drive. And Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance at 597 Davis Drive. The file number associated with the application is D13063-2022, and Ian Clendenning will give a presentation on behalf of the city for this application.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Ian.
Good evening, and through the chair, I'm here to present the minor variance application for 597 Davis Drive. The applicant is seeking relief for the requirement to provide a parking stall for an accessory dwelling unit, for a second dwelling unit. We could go to my slide deck and proceed to the second slide, please. You see here, the key map illustrates the property on Davis Drive, which is located north and east of the intersection of Gardner's Road and Taylor Kidd Boulevard, Cataraqui Center being slightly north and west outside of the key map picture. We could go to the next slide. This picture here illustrates the surrounding neighborhood context, illustrating sort of the neighborhood in which it belongs. If we could go to the next slide, please. As outlined here, the requested variance is to reduce the required one parking stall for a second dwelling unit. That would effectively bring the required parking from 2 for the dwelling plus the second dwelling unit to 1 as currently exists on the site. If we could please turn to the next page. The official plan is highlighted here, highlighting the intention to reduce parking to the extent possible and outlining criteria for the committee's consideration when considering applications to reduce the required park, namely that the property be within walking distance from an express bus route, which here follows Gardner's Road to its terminus at Cataraqui Center, previously mentioned. It also must be within walking distance from a commercial use, which for this property is roughly 350 meters distance, walking distance. It also identifies the requirement for being in proximate walking distance to parkland, open space, or community facilities. Here, parkland, open space, and community facilities are all within 320, 280, and 450 meters respectively, all meeting the official plan criteria for walking distance. If we could go to the next slide, please. This picture here illustrates the existing property and the proposed layout that has a 1.2 meter wide walkway abutting a single parking stall. I note that as illustrated on the zoom in of the lot dimensions, the site can truly only accommodate one parking stall in accordance with the zoning regulations, given that the lot narrows out to 2.64 meters in width, where it flanks the building and the abutting fence. This is insufficient distance to meet either, and certainly both, the requirement of a walking path and a parking stall. If we could go to the next slide, please. Here I've provided a variety of site photos illustrating on the top left, the site that's subject to the application, together with the surrounding context, including the aforementioned.
Ian, you've broken up on us. I'm just wondering if you were to turn your video off, we might have better bandwidth to at least hear your audio.
With regrets, I apologize to the chair.
Okay.
I was just in the middle of highlighting how the site photos here illustrate the site, the surrounding area, including the bus service, commercial uses, and the parkland nearby. We could go to the next slide, please. Throughout the minor variance application, notice was provided in accordance with the Planning Act. Namely, the mailing was delivered to 53 properties within 60 meters of the property, and a posting notice was posted on the property. Throughout this period, we received 2 pieces of correspondence outlining concerns related to additional parking and associated impact on traffic, public safety and emergency access, garbage collection, and preference towards allowing 2 stalls in the front yard and ensuring proper permits and inspections do take place. I highlight that both the full correspondence is attached as the addendum to tonight's agenda. I highlight that many of these concerns are addressed through bylaw enforcement, such as parking off-street. I highlight also that the fire department was circulated and had no issue with the application. And I'm happy to address any further questions. If we could move to the next slide, please. In summary, it is my opinion that the minor variance meets the 4 tests set out in the Planning Act. Namely, it is minor in nature, consistent with the intent of the official plan and the intent of the zoning bylaw, and it is a desirable and appropriate use of the property. And that concludes my presentation.
Great, thanks very much for that, Ian. Okay, so do we have the applicant or their agent? Yes, so if you could come up to the speaker's chair and just identify your name and address for the record. Yeah, either one of those is fine. And just push the little button on the speaker and it will turn red. There you go.
It's Mark Foster, 1218 Ashford Place.
Okay, is there anything further you want to add, Mr. Foster?
No.
No, okay, and welcome to our meeting. Okay, so committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or for staff? Yes, so Vincent.
So my question is, so legally only 1 car could fit on there in that second made-up driveway that would have to go? And if 2 cars, because in the correspondence it mentioned that the people that lived upstairs had 2 cars, so what would they have to do with the second car? Park on the street? And yeah, thanks.
Through the chair, yes, the zoning bylaw in force at the time when this subdivision came to fruition, it did set out the maximum width of a driveway, the minimum width of a driveway, and together with regulations surrounding the maximum frontage in which a driveway can allow for, really there was only 1 parking stall that has evolved into what is essentially servicing 2, if not 3, viable places to park a vehicle, but not parking stalls in accordance with the zoning bylaw. Of course, I have talked with the property owner who's indicating a desire to achieve compliance and a willingness to meet 1 parking stall on the property.
Okay.
So what happens if like 2 people park there? Is that like, I guess people would have to call bylaw and get that enforced?
Through the chair, yes, that would be my understanding. And I think that is not unlike any other situation with parking, whether it's a single dwelling or multiple dwelling. Now, I think I'll also highlight that the zoning bylaw, in addition, well, the official plan allowing for consideration to reduce parking requirements set out in those tests that I set out earlier, it does also require 0.8, which is rounded up to 1 parking stall per dwelling unit, 1 parking stall for a second residential unit, and recognizing that in certain situations it's not needed to provide parking. The zoning bylaw as of right would require 0 parking for a third dwelling unit, and really setting the direction that people will self-select in terms of what residential units they make available and what tenants they take into those residential units. I just wanted to highlight basically the intent of the zoning there.
Okay, thanks. I have a follow-up to that. Would there be room for tandem parking, and that's one car behind the other? And if so, would that be permissible?
Through the chair, unfortunately, the depth of the lot itself is just larger than 6 meters in depth before the face of the building starts. I believe that measurement is 6.5. So it could functionally serve 2 cars, but we would consider it, I mean, very small, smart cars type thing. But no, the zoning bylaw would really only consider it 1 parking stall.
Okay. Committee members, questions? Yes, Greg?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Foster, in the addendums, people are talking a lot about the parking, obviously. And first and foremost, is what they're stating true? Does that occur on the property? And if so, do you notice anyone else on the street? Have you noticed anyone else in that community that does the same thing, that parks like that, anything like that?
Well, I'm not going to say whether it's all true or all false, because there's a number of different claims. What I will say is that they currently are parking 2 cars in tandem, which does cause problems because it is a narrow space between the car and the fence, the new fence, which just was put up this year, and the side of the house for the tenants in the basement to leave the property. There had previously been a third car parked in the front that hasn't been there for a while. But originally, the previous owners had put a space there as well for the third spot. I frankly, I haven't driven around to look at whether there are a number. I mean, there are definitely other secondary suites on the street for sure. Whether they are official ones or not, I'm not sure. I haven't inquired to whether they're legit or not. In terms of parking on the street, there's actually no parking on the opposite side of the street. You are allowed parking on this side because it is a fairly popular bus route, and the street is plenty wide. And I parked there yesterday. Like, there's still cars flying by me with no ease. So, while parking on the street is not a permanent solution, it's definitely a temporary one. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Question? Yeah, Blaine?
So the picture that we have that was sent to us in the addendum, is that correct as to how we would see the property now?
Yes.
It appears that, so there's an appearance that somebody tried to build a driveway on the front lawn. Is that was the previous owner? Is that?
That was the previous owner, yes. Yeah, so currently there's a asphalt driveway with 2 cars in tandem. But the 1 car at the front, that's not considered wide enough to satisfy the city.
So are you asking to make this a permanent fixture? Is that's where I was a little confused. So what are we asking for?
So the intent is to have the walkway go along the side of the fence and move the parking spot over the 4 feet or 1.2 meters, whatever,
Right.
To allow the pathway for the entrance, and then the car would sit beside that.
Okay. And then through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. Also in this, it was mentioned that the fire department had visited the site, and yet we were told that they've approved this. Do we have any follow-up? Is there any report on file for the site?
That's a good question.
So I can address that. The fire department had come on complaints from complaints, and so by the way things were going currently, right? So the plan is to change it, so it's only they're going to have the full pathway to the back.
Okay.
I would also like to provide for added clarity is that the fire department did have the opportunity and did review this and provided no comment about this. It was a conscious decision to say no comment. I did try to get follow-up with the specific community concerns, seeking perhaps validation about those specific concerns about not getting a fire truck through in the event of parking, and in the event of a parked car, which I highlight would not be in accordance with the zoning bylaw to perpetuate that parking that happens between the building and the fence, if they could obtain access to, say, put out a fire or rescue an individual in the building. That is an issue that would happen essentially regardless, or I should say, it's something that the fire department contends to, whether or not it's an accessory dwelling unit or not. But that said, I do recognize the parking concerns. Yes, just wanted to say that they did not visit, the fire department did not visit the site specifically because of this minor variance application. They did, however, review it.
Okay. Yep, Blaine?
So, sorry, and one other question I had there was percentage of green space for the layout of the property.
Sorry, I just...
The percentage of green space that's left once we do this, do we have any kind of figures?
Yeah, Ian, can you chime in on that percentage of green space?
Yes, I did not do an exact calculation, but I could visually determine that it was greater than the 30% required. You'll note that as a recommendation for a condition, should the committee choose to approve this, is that the unofficial parking stall at the front of the lot would be essentially remediated or revegetated instead of sort of the gravel that now has been placed there.
Okay, thanks. And Paul or Jordan, do you have any questions? Yeah.
None for me, thanks.
Okay, thanks. All right. One more? Okay. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to open the public portion of the meeting. So do we have any members of the public with us in person or online wishing to speak to the application for 597 Davis Drive? Please raise your hand or raise your virtual hand in Zoom. Do we have anybody with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 597 Davis Drive? Let yourself be known by raising your virtual hand in Zoom or jumping up to the podium here. On my third and final call, do we have anybody with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 597 Davis Drive? Please raise your virtual hand. No, and I see none. So I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee. But I just have one final question for the applicant and perhaps for staff as well. Is the second residential unit existing right now?
Yes, it's been existing, as noted by some of the neighbors, 12 plus years.
Okay.
And I purchased it approximately a year ago.
Okay. And so is somebody occupying it right now?
Yes.
Okay, so I just have, I guess my comment deals with the condition on page 22 of our package. It's condition number 2, and just the way it's worded, I don't know that it reflects what's actually going on, and we might want to revisit that. It says, condition for occupancy, that prior to occupancy of the secondary dwelling unit being granted, including under any permit under the OBC Act, the owner applicant shall remove any portion of the driveway which occupies a greater width than 40%. So should that be changed to kind of reflect what's actually happening?
Thank you. Through the chair, I chose that wording essentially recognizing that the trigger for this minor variance application was the owner applying for a building permit. And perhaps he can elaborate on this, but that I admit that at the time I did not know that it was already occupied.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that it could be better, but I think this still captures the intent.
Okay. Well, James, I think, wants to chime in as well.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Chair, I can assist a little bit here. So looking at the wording of it, yes, I can see that this would be confusing, but we do have an order of operations to follow with this. Oh, children.
Yeah.
So we do have an order of operations to follow here. So even though the unit is occupied, when we're working with someone on legalizing a unit, we proactively work with them to bring it up to standard. So the first step we need to do here in order for permits to be issued for this to legalize the dwelling is get through the minor variance process so that this can be zone compliant. That's what's set out before us tonight, dealing with both the parking and the demonstration of the 1.2 meter wide walkway from the second residential unit to the street. So if you look at the drawing on exhibit, I had it open a moment ago, exhibit F. Granted, it's not to scale, but this is to demonstrate that the kind of hatched area that looks like a waffle on the right-hand side of the dwelling is the walkway that would connect the dwelling unit to the street, with the parking space located adjacent to it. So once we can move through the minor variance process, they can then obtain permits and the fire inspections in order to move forward with the legalization of these units. So that's kind of the stepped process here.
Okay.
Yes, the wording could have been a little clearer, but I don't think it really misses the intent of what we're looking to do tonight.
Okay. Okay. I was just going to suggest maybe changing it to say that prior to continued occupancy, just because somebody's already there, it just doesn't fit what's going on, so.
Yes, and I don't know how best to amend this tonight to be what a building official would need in
Okay.
order to
Okay.
clean up that language.
Okay.
So I'm hesitant to amend the language of the condition as it's written.
Okay, all right. Well, that's out there anyway, so thanks for that. Okay, so committee members, can we first call for a motion to, so moved by Greg and seconded by Paul? Any discussion? Yeah, Vincent.
So I just wanted to clarify, make sure I know what's going on. So the pathway, will that be something that's built separately, or will it still just be the driveway? Will it be something that's specifically different where a car can't actually physically go park there? Is it going to be like different type? Is
Sure,
that
I
what's going
interpreted
on?
that it's the existing driveway that was always meant to be with the property, and that the part that's been added on in front of the house will be removed. So it would just be, and correct me if I'm wrong, am I correct in that? It would just be the original driveway as it was meant to be?
I haven't been advised what exactly I need to do to separate the parking from the driveway. I just know that it will need to be separate.
Okay, can we get clarification on that? I think that's a valid question. Maybe Ian, can you chime in on that? Or James, do you have a quick answer for it?
Yes, absolutely. And maybe James will chime in with the specific wording of the zoning bylaw. But basically, the zoning bylaw 2022-62 requires a separately delineated path. Now, typically, people will install, say, patio stone versus asphalt. I know in, say, makeshift cases, they've painted lines. To meet the letter of the law, it is separately delineated.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments? See none, so all in favor, raise your physical hand. And that would be unanimously carried. Thank you. Thank you. All right, the next application is for 338 Palace Road. And Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance, file number D13-062-2022 at 338 Palace Road. Chris Wicca will give the presentation for this application.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much. Just to preface, I think you'll find some similarities between this application and the previous application as we go through.
Okay.
So what I've done is I've actually just, I'm going to try and provide some comment that addresses some of the previous questions as I go as well. So hopefully that will be helpful to the committee. So this is an application for minor variance, and the purpose and effect is to provide relief from the Kingston zoning bylaw 2022-62 to reduce the number of off-street parking spaces for an additional unit from 1 to 0 to permit the construction of a second residential unit within an existing semi-detached dwelling. Next slide, please. The property in question here is at 338 Palace Road on the west side of Palace Road. It backs onto Sir John A. Macdonald Boulevard You can see to the north is Carruthers Avenue, and just to the south off of this map is Brock Street. Next page, please. The requested variance in this instance, again, is to reduce the number of required parking spaces from 1 to 0 to permit the introduction of a second residential unit in the dwelling. Next slide, please. As you heard previously, there's an official plan policy that speaks to the reduction in parking, and it states that applications seeking parking relief for an additional residential unit have to satisfy the following locational criteria. And again, this relates to walking distance, which is defined as no greater than 600 meters. And the three conditions are that the property is within walking distance of an express Kingston transit bus route, that the property is within walking distance of commercial uses, and that the property is within walking distance of parkland, open space, or community facilities. And in this instance, there is an express bus route that runs along Palace Road with route 701, 702. And there are commercial uses to the north within 600 meters, and also to the north is the Kingston Center with a broad variety of amenities. And then there are two parks to the east on this same side of Sir John A, and there's a third actually on the west side of Sir John A. McDonald Boulevard, all within a 600-meter walking distance of this property. Next slide, please. So this is the proposal. Currently, there is a parking space in front of the dwelling, and there is also currently a walkway. There's a paved pathway that leads to the front door, and there's currently a gate along the side of the dwelling. And what is proposed is for an entrance off the rear for a second unit. The property is approximately 12 meters in width, and the bylaw does state that driveway can be 6 meters or 40% of the width of the lot, whichever is less. And so in this instance, that would be a 4.8 meter maximum width for a driveway, which is insufficient to accommodate a second parking space. As such, the applicant has opted to reduce the number of required parking spaces to 1. I do want to note that a 1.2 meter pathway, is required both now in the new zoning bylaw to access the entrance at the front of the property and also to follow along the side of the property to reach the rear. And there is insufficient parking area or insufficient length there to be able to park tandem parking spaces and also accommodate that path of travel. Next slide, please. These are some photos of the site. You can see at the top is the dwelling. It's a little bit difficult to see at the scale, but there is the gate in behind the vehicles there. I just want to point out that we've got the park on the center right, and there's a picture of the transit stop nearby to the south of the site on the bottom left, and some of the commercial on the right. Next slide, please. So notice was provided in accordance with the Planning Act, and notice was delivered to the 25 properties within 60 meters of this property. One comment has been received to date, and there were concerns raised regarding additional parking and on street and potential for adding traffic to the street. There were comments regarding the number of residents and the nature of the tenancy of this property. There were comments about noise issues, concerns about the plumbing and the maintenance of this property specifically. I did receive correspondence from both building services and from licensing confirming that building services had confirmed that they're satisfied that there was no rooming or boarding house, and there was an enforcement case there that was closed with no further action. And licensing has also confirmed that the rental is permitted under the bylaw, and it is not in violation of the short-term rental bylaw. Next slide, please. So the recommendation in this instance is that the requested proposal is in keeping with the intent of the zoning bylaw and is in keeping with the intent of the official plan. And the request is minor in nature, and that indeed it meets its good planning. So the minor variance in this instance will result in a reduction in the required parking spaces for this proposed second residential unit from 1 space to 0, which will permit the establishment of the second residential unit. I welcome your questions.
Great, thanks very much for that. So at this point, I'd like to call on the owner or the applicant or their agent. Do I come up? And identify yourself by name and address. Do we have them virtually?
They are virtual.
Okay. Okay, so Pablo Morse, we recognize you. If we could, I just get you to state your full name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Pablo Morse, and I live at 338 Palace Road.
All right, welcome. Is there anything further you want to add to the application?
There's nothing further I'd like to add.
Okay. Just to confirm, you said your address was 338 Palace Road?
That is correct.
Okay, good. Okay, committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant? Vincent?
So if you can only have legally one car parked there, why is there often 3 or 4 parked there?
So, with regards to that question, I was recently made aware that there would only be one legal parking space, so that was an error on my part, and I informed my tenants that there should only be one car at the lot, and the issue has been resolved. There will only be one car currently parking there.
So when legally, so to follow up, so you will never be able to fit 2 cars on there legally?
That is correct.
Any other questions, committee members? So I have one actually. So how many units are in the building now?
There's currently one unit in the building.
Currently 1 unit, and
It is a semi-detached, pardon me for interjecting. It is a semi-detached dwelling,
okay,
but within the specific unit, it's only one.
certainly. And how many like bedrooms are there? How many for accommodation?
There are 4 bedrooms.
And how do you rent that out? Do you have a one lease with 4 tenants or 4 separate leases one per room?
So I would either be within 1 room leasing to 3 tenants, or as it stands now, I am leasing to 3 tenants in 3 rooms, but 1 sublease for my current room as I was away on military training.
Okay, so you're renting sort of the house out to 3 people. So 3 people are named jointly and severally on a lease for 3 of the rooms. And then the 4th room is where you stay, is your room? And you were away, so you were subletting that out. Okay, that gives me clarification. Thank you. Any follow-up questions, committee members? Okay, so at this point, I'd like to open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us wishing to speak to the application for 338 Palace Road? Yep. Yeah, if you just would like to come and sit, yep, right there is fine. And make yourself comfortable. Yeah, push. Yeah.
Really lean into the mic because it can be quite quiet.
Sure.
So get you to state your name and address for the record, please.
Of course. Good evening, everyone. My name is Karina Murray, and this is my husband, Danny Murray. We live at 336 Palace Road. We also forward an objection to this minor variance through email, which I want to be sure that you receive it. Okay. So we are not just representing ourselves, we're also representing 3 other neighbors that they are living in front of 338 Palace Road. We are the neighbors at 336. So we live in the semi-detached house beside this neighbor. First of all, I want to say that this person doesn't live in 338 Palace Road. It's not that he was out on a trip, so it's given a false statement, which is actually quite deceiving. So the other thing that I want to say is that I sent all those pictures with all those cars. That is constant. They are not just blocking, they are doing something illegal that is costing the city, because if I have to call the city every day to tell them that they are breaking the law, how much money is that for the city? That's correct. Can you reason with me, right? The other thing is that they are not just doing something unlawful, but they are also blocking a walkway. The sidewalk is totally blocked. That is an impediment for all the wheelchair people, handicapped, and children. We have a daycare at the YMCA, and all those kids is a problematic situation. They cannot care less. It's common sense. It's part of our community of commitment. All our families, we live there for the last almost 18 years. So we're very much well known in our community. We're all neighbors, we're good neighbors. We're committed to each other. So since this person moved in, it had been a problem after the other one. Not just not fulfilling a problem with a dwelling wall and a plumbing problem that just the plumber itself that he hired told them that they really have to fix. So for over 2 years, we've been waiting until nothing had happened, and all what we could hear is that he doesn't have any money. But now, hello, he has money to do some renovations, to rent more rooms. The other part that we're going to have to go in a private way regarding the rooming house is totally illegal. We have to now work with our lawyer in order to find out what papers the city, the planning had got, just to fulfill that they are not running a short-term rental, which they are. I have proof in pictures. That part we have to work with our lawyer, because we look for help to the city, and planning says that they don't have any problems whatsoever with that. So we have to really follow up on that. We know it's not true. At the point that this summer, we were looking at the cars were rotating in a way that there's new cars in a few weeks and so on. So we were wondering about that. And it happened in August, was it? Yeah, in August, when we just came from our holidays, we could hear a fan running in the dwelling wall. So we had to go and talk to the neighbors, and they told us that this person is renting rooms, publishing with air conditioner, but the air conditioner doesn't work. They don't even have fans.
1 more minute?
Yes, okay. Sure. So they don't even have fans. So these people, they're coming, they don't know the law, they don't have anywhere to go, they already paid. So we had to lend funds to these people. We never saw them back. So we find that this owner is breaking the law in so many ways, and now he's asking for not giving a dedicated parking to a tenant that he might abuse. And also we live on Palace Road, where there's a fire station and there's an ambulance station. So Palace Road is very important. If you can see in the pictures, they're not just parking on the driveway, but there are cars that from the rentals, the room rentals, they're parking also on the street. Plus the new building coming on Park Street, this is going to be a disaster. So we are objecting, it's not just us, but also 337, 333, and 334 Palace Road are objecting.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak to the application for 338 Palace Road? Please raise your physical hand or your virtual hand in Zoom. And my third and final call, do we have anybody with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 338 Palace Road? Please raise your hand, and I see none. So I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the applicant or to staff to maybe address some of these comments. So Mr. Morse, you've got your hand raised. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for your time. I just want to address that we've been having significant problems with the neighbor with the semi-detached unit. However, all of the issues presented being the noise from a ceiling fan, the noise from showers, air conditioning, were all rectified and verified to be lawful. So we had the police come on one occasion, and they had no issues, particularly with our the way our house was set up. Additionally, we had a emergency air conditioner being used in place of the air conditioner that had temporarily not worked. And moving forward, as I was away, I had expected everything to be good in terms of the parking situation. However, I wholeheartedly apologize that that wasn't the case, and I will definitely be making sure that it could be a condition perhaps that there will be no such parking infractions in the future.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Through you, Chair, I'd be happy to add comments as well.
Yeah, yes, Chris.
Just in addition to what the applicant has responded, I just refer back to the comments that I made previously, that some of the comments from the member of the public were investigated by building services and by licensing and were found to not be an issue currently. I'd also like to note that, as was noted earlier as well, so in the diagram that's provided, there is a one parking space indicated. And if there was to be a second car parked next to that, it would effectively be parked on top of the walkway, which would not be permitted, and ticketing by enforcement would certainly be possible. Beyond that, parking on street is permitted most times of the year. So it would be legal for renters who are in this accommodation to be parked on street at certain times of the day.
Okay. All right, thanks very much for that. Okay, so committee members, any final follow-up questions? No, so yes, Vincent?
So you mentioned that a second car would have to be parked on the pathway, but in the picture, there's like 3 cars parked and it's not even on the pathway on the left. I mean, are they encroaching onto the other parking lot from the neighbor in these pictures that were provided?
Through you, Chair, it does appear that the parked cars that are in the photos are encroaching on the adjacent property. That's correct.
Okay, that's good. All right, so I'll turn it to the committee. Committee members, how would you like to proceed? Does somebody want to make a motion? Put it on the floor. So moved by Jordan and seconded by Blaine. Any discussion? Vincent.
I think, though, that approving this would probably make the problem worse because obviously there's people with cars living there already, and then you're going to have more people living there with more cars. And there's nowhere. And then the street is an emergency street for fire and ambulance. So that would be my reluctance with this.
I know.
This application.
Anybody else want to chime in? Yep. Great.
Yeah, I just want to say that's, from what staff presented, it obviously passes. But just for me, like driving on Palace Road, it is a busy road. There are already a fair amount of cars parked there. There's some building developments down towards the Canadian Tire at the end. There's something about the idea of reducing a parking spot on a property and just getting rid of it so more cars park on that street. It doesn't quite feel right to me, but nonetheless, I will vote in favor.
Okay. Anybody else? Sorry, Jordan?
Thank you. I'd just like to say that I think this is a minor variance. I'm looking at the 4 corners here that this committee is to adjudicate. I think that a lot of the comments were irrelevant in terms of what we can rule on here today. I think it's a desirable variance. I think there is parking on the road, and we've heard from the owner that the parking situation will be rectified in future. I believe it does maintain the intent of the zoning bylaw, and it also fits the official plan, so you'll have my vote in favor.
Okay, thanks for that.
Through you, Chair, may I add one point? Sorry to interrupt.
No, we're in our committee deliberation at this point.
Oh, my apologies.
Yeah, but from my perspective, I really empathize with the neighbors. I mean, I've been there. It sounds like there's been a lot of there's, you know, increasing activity that hasn't blended well in with the neighborhood. And I always a little worried when we have an absentee owner who really doesn't know what's going on, but yet collecting rents. And, you know, when I heard indications that it had been operating as a rooming house, my knee-jerk reaction was, I mean, I can't support this. I understand it might satisfy the 4 tests, but, you know, I think we're taking a bad situation and making it worse. But I did hear information tonight from the applicant that he seems to be on top of it, and I think he's aware that, you know, that the kind of walls have closed in on what you sort of can and can't do and get away with. So yeah, from a planning perspective, I'll certainly be voting in favor of it, but I think this should be this whole experience this evening should serve as a shot fired across the bow of any kind of property owner who, you know, thinks that they can just turn a blind eye to a lot of stuff going on in their property. Anybody else before I call the vote? Yeah, Lane?
I totally agree. I think that what Jordan said there is we need to look at that and remember that. I kind of grappled with the same idea, but I think we have made a bit of a point here that we're expecting a little bit more, and we're being told. So we need to make our decisions based on what we're being told, unfortunately. So
Exactly. Yeah, very well done. Okay, so committee members, all in favor, raise your physical hand. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 against and 1 against. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor and 1 against. And it carries. Thank you. Okay. All right, so the next application we have is an application for consent, 237 Mowat Avenue and 6 Herbert Street. Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Next is an application for consent at 237 Mowat Avenue and 6 Herbert Street. The file number is D10-023-2017, and Tim Fisher will give the presentation for this application.
Welcome, Tim.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. Through you, Mr. Chair, we have an application for consent at 237 Mowat Street. This application was initially processed through the delegated authority as it previously was part of a zoning bylaw amendment. We did receive comments, so we have it coming to the public meeting with the Committee of Adjustment to make its decision. So the purpose and effect of the application is the applicant's looking at severing a 634.7 square meter parcel of land with 26 meters of road frontage on Herbert Street, which is actually known as 6 Herbert Street, while retaining a 1,220.6 square meter parcel of land with 20.8 meters of road frontage on Mowat Avenue, which is addressed as 237. Next slide there, please. So the subject property is approximately just a little over 1,800 square meters in area, with 20.8 meters of road frontage on Mowat Avenue and 26 meters of road frontage on Herbert Street. And as you can tell, it's quite an odd shape. It's 237 is rectangular, and where you see the shaded area is the proposed severed, which is 6 Herbert Street. So the property is designated as residential in the official plan and zone urban residential 7, or UR7, with legacy exemption L450 in the new Kingston zoning bylaw number 2022-62. The subject property is developed with a 2-story apartment building containing a total of 8 residential units. The subject property is located in the Portsmouth neighborhood and is surrounded by residential land uses consisting primarily of 1- and 2-unit dwellings, triplexes, and small-scale apartment buildings. Next slide there, please. The two photos here show the road frontages, one on Herbert Street and again the other on Mowat. Next slide, please. So the subject property was subject to a zoning bylaw amendment, which was application D14015-2019, I believe. The application was to permit a multiple, or to recognize the multiple unit dwelling with a maximum of 8 dwelling units, and to address some of the performance standards in regards to the property itself, subject to the severance. Through the application, the number of bedrooms was limited to the existing amount, so the owner cannot go ahead and add any more bedrooms. And parking is limited to 8 parking spaces, so there will be 1 parking space for each individual unit. So council approved the zoning bylaw amendment through bylaw 2022-28. And on February 4th, the bylaw was subsequently appealed, which was later dismissed at the Ontario Land Tribunal on September 17th. The site-specific provisions were also approved under the new Kingston zoning bylaw, which you can see through the legacy exception layer, which is L450. Next slide. So initially, the applicant applied for severing the lot on Herbert, and they were originally proposing to construct a 4-unit townhouse or row house on the subject property. During the initial public consultation through the zoning bylaw amendment, the applicant heard the concerns that were raised and then revised their application to just construct a single-family dwelling on the property itself. So the revised proposal, as you see on the right-hand side, shows the proposed lot or the severed lot with a building envelope. So the yellow area is where potentially a house could be located, subject to the setback requirements. Now, I do want to note that the setback requirements in this proposal is based on bylaw 8499. However, the new zoning bylaw has a 7.5 meter front yard setback, which is greater than the 6 meter, which is shown here. Next slide there, please. I should also mention that any new development that actually is going to be built on the severed lot is going to be bound by the list of permitted uses and the performance standards of the UR7 zone. So this slide here shows the proposed retained lot, which will have the 8-unit apartment building. So the severance will provide residential intensification within the urban boundary on full municipal services. The services are located along Herbert Street for the severed lot, and the existing services for the existing dwelling is on Mowat Avenue. The retained parcel and its existing development complies with the permitted uses and the provisions of the legacy exemption in zoning bylaw 2022-62. The existing front yard parking area and its access are being redesigned to eliminate the northern driveway and its road access to Mowat Avenue. The area will be reinstated with green space, which will provide additional landscape open space and provide further separation between the parking area and the residential uses to the north. A single 6-meter wide driveway will be maintained along the southern portion of the lot, which will maintain its road access on Mowat Avenue. The applicant proposes to plant 8 Swedish aspens along along Mowat Avenue, which will provide additional visual screening. Outdoor amenity space will be maintained in the rear yard and the additional landscape open space. The subject lot has a total landscape open space of 60%, while the retained portion will have approximately 46%. This will comply with the minimum percentage of landscape open space of 30%. No additions or external changes are proposed to the existing apartment building. As such, no impacts in regards to privacy or overlook are anticipated. While the existing 8-unit apartment building represents a medium density development, the dwelling and its front yard parking have existed in its current form and use for approximately 50 years with no negative impacts on the abutting residential uses and streetscape. The property is not a designated structure or a listed property under the Ontario Heritage Act, nor is it located adjacent to any properties that are designated. It is recommended that as a condition of consent that the owner applicant shall comply with the site improvements as illustrated in the landscape park plan and site plan pertaining to the retained parcel. This needs to be completed prior to the issuance of the certificate of official. I'd like to note that this being a condition, the applicant would have to fulfill, and if this application does not go through or the application lapses, the lot stays as the way it is, and the entrances and parking and such stay the way they are. So the site improvements won't happen through if the application lapses, or unless the applicant wants to go ahead and do it on their own. Next slide. I can't see this here. There we go. So public notice. So a notice of statutory public meeting was provided by advertisement in the form of 2 signs posted on the subject property 14 days in advance of the meeting. I can confirm that one sign was posted along the Mowat Street frontage and the other along the Herbert Street frontage. In addition, notices were sent by mail to a total number of 32 property owners within 60-meter radius of the property. A courtesy notice was also placed in the Kingston Whig Standard. As courtesy, notices were also mailed to all residences which submitted comments or had objections through the zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. We have received public correspondence. The report number 22079 provides correspondence submitted through the application for zoning bylaw amendment. That information was provided to enlighten the committee members of the concerns raised during that application process. A total of 2 letters of concern and 1 letter of support have been received after the preparation of this report. The correspondence that has been provided to date has been distributed to the applicant and to the committee members. Next slide there, please. So the correspondence that we have to date, I'll go through some of the highlights of them and address some of them. So the city has been notified on multiple occasions of missing letters of objection from the public. So all correspondence received through the public notification period have been uploaded to the DASH system and made available to the applicants and committee members. Correspondence received through zoning bylaw amendment D10-015-2019 are saved separately and available through DASH. Precedents that support the severance, a lot with multiple family dwelling, a lot with multiple family dwelling in the A2 designation. So each application is reviewed and considered on its own merits. We do not look at previous severances and its past reasons for acceptance. So each application is reviewed individually based on current zoning bylaw and official plan policies. The new lot will have negative impacts on the neighborhood. The severed lot was historically a separate lot until the owner purchased both 237 Mowat Avenue and 6 Herbert Street. The properties were then merged on title as a result of the abutting properties under the same ownership. The consent application will, in essence, recreate the historic lot fabric and will be in keeping with the existing lot fabric of the neighborhood. And as you can see within the key map, there are a number of severances within the area or smaller lots within the area, and particularly there is another lot across the street from the severed property, which may have gone through this process a long time ago. There are no sidewalks along Herbert Street, and that will have impacts on the streetscape. So currently, yes, the sidewalks are not located along Herbert Street or Hatter Street. The severed lot will maintain the existing streetscape, so there will not be any changes to the existing streetscape. Residences are encouraged to speak to their counselor in regards to the need for sidewalks within the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So the severance will have adverse impacts on the streetscape or the abutting uses and is not in keeping with the existing residential neighborhood. So piggybacking on what I just said, the severed and retained lots comply with the minimum frontage and area for the intended use. The size and shape of each lot is similar in size and area to existing residential lots in the neighborhood. Whether the setbacks meet the safety requirements of the multiple family dwelling units. Both building services and fire and rescue services have no objections or concerns regarding the continued use of 237 Mowat Avenue. It's important to note that any new alterations or additions or development on the retained lot would require a building permit and will be reviewed then. Neighbors are unhappy of the existing multiple family dwelling and the storage of a commercial truck. The site improvements, as recommended as conditions of the consent, will eliminate the second driveway where the truck currently parks. So this would initially remove the truck and the trailer itself, or the commercial vehicles. The 8 parking spaces that will be provided would be for the residential units that are there. The 0.3 meter setback along the northern lot line will hinder access to 2 of the existing units. So the staircase along the portion of the northern lot line was addressed through the zoning bylaw amendment. It was reduced to 0.3 meters, and the proposal as it's shown today to create the severed lot will comply. It's important to note that access will still be provided. The staircase, which leads to a deck at the rear of the dwelling. The staircase provides safe access to the rear yard and access to means of egress for the dwelling, or actually for the units. Access to the rear yard is maintained along the southern side of the multiple family dwelling. Next slide there. And the final 2 comments, heritage concerns, as heritage buildings are located in the neighborhood. The resident that provided this comment did provide some pictures of local heritage buildings along that street or within the neighborhood. However, as I noted before, the subject property is not a designated structure, and it is not adjacent to any designated property under the Ontario Heritage Act. Therefore, a historic impact study is not required as part of this application process. and a heritage permit is not required at the time of building permit for 6 Herbert Street. Front yards and its uses. Severance will remove front yard from Herbert. The existing lot will have frontage on, or actually each resulting lot will have frontage on a maintained municipal road. A front yard will be provided for the retained lot, and additional landscaping proposed will provide additional landscaping, and the new parking layout will provide dedicated parking spaces to the multiple family dwellings. So improvements will be happening. Development on the severed lot will be required to comply with the minimum front yard requirement of 7.5 meters as per the UR7 zone. So therefore, a front yard will be provided, subject to the design and development of future owners of whoever wants to develop that lot. Next slide there, please. So the recommendation, the proposal has regard to the matters under subsection 5124 of the Planning Act, is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It conforms with all applicable policies of the official plan and is in keeping with the general intent and purposes of the zoning bylaw. A plan of subdivision is not necessary for the proper and orderly development. And the consent application is recommended for provisional approval and subject to the conditions of consent that are proposed. Next slide. So the final slide, what's next? The committee's decision is subject to a 20-day appeal period from the date of mailing of the notice of decision. The lot is not officially created until the applicant has satisfied all conditions of consent within 2 years from the date of mailing of the notice of decision, and that the certificate official is registered on title. So there is a bit of work that is required by the applicant if the committee chooses to approve the application today. I leave this in your hands and available for any questions or comments.
Great. Thanks for the thorough report and for going through line by line the objections that came in from the neighbors. That's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to call on the owner or the applicant or their agent to identify yourself by name and address, please. I see Carolyn Ross. Yeah, and if you could just identify yourself by name and address.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee regarding the consent application. My name is Carolyn Ross, and I'm Senior Planner with RFA Planning Consultant, agent for the applicant. I have a PowerPoint. I sent it to the city. I'm not sure, do you guys coordinate that or?
Yes, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
My colleague is just getting it up, and then you just have to tell us next slide, and we are good to go once it's ready to go.
Sure. Okay, thank you. It's a very, very brief PowerPoint, and I'll avoid duplicating anything that Tim has covered in his very comprehensive presentation. Okay. We're not up yet.
And I'm sorry, Carolyn, did we get your address for the record?
Well, it's with the planning firm. It's in Belleville, 211 Dundas Street East in Belleville.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my colleague is just working to get it up on our system. It might take a minute or two. My apologies.
Thank you.
Okay. So the application for consent was filed in 2017, and through extensive consultation with city staff and public input, the consent application is before you this evening. City staff had asked us to proceed first with the rezoning application to ensure compliance with the zoning bylaw and the official plan prior to presenting the consent application. So the zoning has already been addressed and has been approved. The application will reestablish a historically separate lot that inadvertently merged on title. So prior to 2005, these were already two lots. So the application is largely technical in nature. Next slide, please. The retained lot is 237 Mowat, and it's shown in green. It accommodates an 8-unit dwelling and the parking area. The proposed severed lot is shown in red and is known as 6 Herbert Street. It's vacant with the exception of a small metal shed, and it's sufficient in size to accommodate a single detached unit in accordance with the UR7 zone recently approved by the city. Next slide, please. So this is the zoning sketch, and I realize this is for the consent application, but it's important, I think, to get a handle on the zoning because I think some of the neighbors' concerns relate more to zoning than the consent application. So 6 Herbert did not require a rezoning. It maintained the A2 zone, and it can accommodate a single detached unit. The rezoning was only for 237 Mowat, and it was rezoned with special provisions to recognize the existing use, the building location on the lot, and it also addresses the front yard parking. As Tim mentioned, City Council approved the zoning bylaw amendment on February 1st, 2002. The zoning bylaw amendment was subsequently appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and the tribunal dismissed the appeal at its hearing on September the 17th of 2022. So the zoning for Mowat is now in effect. Next slide, please. Yes. So again, this slide is really for background only, and it outlines the special provisions that were approved by the city and upheld by the Ontario Land Tribunal. 8 units are permitted in the multi-family dwelling. 1 parking space per unit is required. Parking is permitted in the front yard. Maximum front yard parking area is limited to 136 square meters. Parking area minimum setback from the front lot line is 3.6 meters, and the side yard setback on the north property line to the stairs is 0.3 meters. That's to the stairs. That's not to the wall of the existing structure. Again, this was all approved and is in effect. Next slide, please. This is a sketch you've already seen. It's the site improvements for 237 Mowat. Recommended condition number 8 in planning staff's report addresses the site improvements, and the plan was done in consultation with the City of Kingston planning staff. The north gravel driveway will be removed and landscaped. 8 Swedish aspens will be planted along the frontage and buffer the parking area. A concrete sidewalk will be constructed across the frontage of the building and connect the sidewalks at the north and south end of the property. Bike racks will be installed under the porch, 1 for each unit, and parking spaces in the driveway will meet the city standards. So the application provides an opportunity for the streetscape to be improved, while at the same time regaining a lot that the city has otherwise lost for technical reasons. The application conforms to the provincial policy statement and the city's official plan. And I also note that we concur with the conditions as presented in planning staff's report, with a revision to item number 1, which changed the time frame from 1 year to 2 years. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks very much. So committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or their agent? No, I'm seeing none, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting now. Do we have any members of the public with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 237 Mowat Avenue and 6 Herbert Street? Please raise your hand. Yep, and you can come up over here to the speaker's corner. Yeah, just make yourself comfortable. Yeah, any one of those, and just tap the button until the red light comes on.
And then speak quite close to the mic will kind of make you.
And I'll get you to state your name and address for the record.
Oh, my name is Siobhan Brookhoven, and my address is 7 Herbert Street.
Okay.
So I'm just across the road from this dwelling. And what I was wondering was, Carolyn, you had initially applied for 4 row houses, right?
Oh, you can speak to me.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
There was an initial thing to have 4 row houses there and to change the zoning to a B zone. Now, I know that B doesn't exist anymore, But my question was how, sorry, maybe I got to rephrase this. When we have a zoning bylaws for multifamily dwellings, they need extra green space around them because there's not just one person in there, there's 8. But so how was that looked at when you have this 0.3 from the front entrance of an apartment upstairs? How is that enough space?
So your question through me is was green space considered as part of the application?
Was the green space for a multifamily dwelling?
Yeah.
Not just the A2 zone, which is now the UR7 zone for a single family, like the green space that a single family requires is not the same as when you've got 8 families sharing a green space. So I was just wondering if that was...
Yep, so I've got that down. Any other concerns or comments or questions?
Oh, should I go to comments and...
You've got 5 minutes to make your comments and questions. And then
Okay,
I'll
so,
move on.
and that is my big concern, is
Okay.
that normally when you sever a property and you have like a little space on both sides, like this 0.3, that's usually because all the front doors face in one direction, and it's okay to have a little skinny bit between places. But in this particular dwelling, there's 2 apartment doors that access from that north side. So they've only got 0.3, 1 foot, to get into their main entrance. And that also, what it's described as a staircase up to a balcony is actually the main entrance for an apartment. It's the only entrance for the apartment. So I just don't think that the city has ever cut off the front green space for a main entrance. And there's 2 entrances on Herbert and only 1 on Mowat. So this is actually this is the main entrance. There's more people that are entering the property from the Herbert Street side.
Okay.
And so that concerns me, and also my concern is that if it was severed that close to the building, and everybody in the neighborhood has a 6-foot fence, so there's 2 main windows, and that's the sunlight that goes into those 2 tenant apartments. And if you sever the property that close, and like I would prefer it was severed farther away, so that those 2 apartments actually have access to sunlight, because you're cutting off their sunlight. And I do think that impacts the existing tenants. So that's a big concern for me, that 3 are impacted, right? There's 1 upstairs apartment that can no longer get into the backyard from that side. They would have to take their laundry and walk 3 sides of that apartment building to be able to do their laundry every week, forever. And I just think that that's a big change for the existing people for just having 1 additional house. So I just think it should, in the spirit of the law, Kingston says you need more green space for multifamily dwellings, and I think they should honor that.
Okay.
Even though it's technically in a UR7.
Sure.
It is a multifamily dwelling.
And so 1 more minute. Anything else?
Yeah, I am concerned that in the report, it says that there's a commercial vehicle park there, which is completely against the existing bylaws. And the planning committee has known about it for over 2 years from the first meeting, and people have made several complaints. And when Tim says that, in 2 years he'll take up that driveway and then he won't physically be able to, like, I'm wondering, why is the bylaws not enforced here? Like, that should have been addressed, and that commercial vehicle should have been gone because it doesn't meet the standard. And there's lots of other people that get bylaw infraction notices and it's enforced, but I don't understand why it's not being done for this property. That vehicle should have been gone 2 years ago. And so I'm worried about the sunlight, and I do think that the provincial policy statement also does talk about heritage neighborhoods. Like, Kingston is a heritage town. We've got 2, Berryfield Village is now incorporated in Kingston. Where I live is the 1700s, right? It's part of the Crawford Purchase. So this is a section of town that people come to Kingston to see. We are a tourist town, and we have to be very careful about these older neighborhoods. And intensification is fine, additional lots are fine, but not too much. And this, with 8 units, that's already over the density that the city has for everything.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Okay, do we have any other members of the public with us? Yeah. I'm just wishing to speak to the application for 237 Mowat Avenue. Yes. And just speak your name and address for the record, please.
Is that me? My name is Angela Brookoven. I am the mother of my lovely daughter, Siobhan. And my name is on the deed of the house opposite the property we are talking about.
Okay.
So I just want to put my 2 dibs in. And my concern really is for the neighborhood, which is a quiet neighborhood. And that little Herbert Street, which is little, has a constant stream of mothers pushing prams and people walking their dogs and people cycling there. And this is going to change the whole atmosphere for danger, for people driving out of that property if it is built. And that is my concern. I mean, I love the neighborhood. I think it's just priceless, and it's part of the heritage of Kingston. So that's my concern, as Siobhan would put it, okay? Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Hello.
Hi, Leah DePaul. So we have recognized you, and you have 5 minutes to speak.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I live at 58 Hatter, and my driveway goes out on Herbert Street. I'm the only other driveway on this very tiny street. And I have a number of concerns, including with what Tim said in the description of things. He said there weren't concerns from the neighbors, but there was an incredible amount of disagreement with the application for 237 Moet. And the current councillor also said that he's encountered a lot of comments when he was doing canvassing around people not being happy with the existing multi-unit dwelling and the parking lot. And even with the changes, it doesn't change the fact that there's a parking lot at the front of 237 Moet Avenue. The property is already well beyond the capacity for a residential dwelling by severing it. And I listened to the Lisa Capper-Casing, I can't remember exactly how to say her name, speaking about tiny homes. And she said that if you have a secondary unit on your property, you weren't allowed to have a tiny home or an accessory suite on your home. So I don't understand, when you already have 8 dwelling units on a property, why we would be allowing a severance when there wasn't actually even sufficient space to provide that severance. Like, it would be one thing if the yard to begin with had sufficient space to accommodate the setbacks required for a multi-dwelling unit, but they don't. So another thing I took issue with what Tim said is, it has fire and rescue been brought in and asked that if the property was severed and a fence was put up, would they be able to get to the tenants who are on the north side of the building as well as at the back of the building? There is no laneway in this area. And the egress that they're speaking about for the people at the back in an emergency would be jumping someone else's 6-foot fence and escaping through their yard. So that doesn't sound like a very suitable plan to me. So I'd like to see a little more investigation into that. Tim also said that they don't look at precedents, but I think there needs to be a precedent. There are reasons why we allow intensification in some situations and not others. And in this case, I find it highly unusual that we are looking at severing a yard in which we've eliminated the required setbacks to allow that severance, and where the overall property is already well over the allowance for the dwelling units on 2 properties. And I think that's something that the Committee of Adjustments needs to take into consideration. I also want to note that Mr. Nikas does not follow existing bylaws around his commercial vehicle. He does not live at that home. yet he parks his residential truck there and trailer, which seems to be above the allowances. He knows that that's been a concern for neighbors for a long time. He also parks that truck and trailer in spaces that create a great deal of unsafety for others, like in T-junctions and in front of fire hydrants. So as a resident, I don't particularly trust that anything that's asked of him or that he commits to, that he'll follow through with.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, and do we have any other members of the public with us who wish to speak to the application for 237 Mowat Avenue and 6 Herbert Street? Please raise your physical hand or your virtual hand in Zoom. That was my third and final call, and I see no one, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to staff or the applicant to address some of these additional public comments. Who wants to start? Carolyn?
Yeah, I was just looking for my little hand.
Yes, okay.
Siobhan had noted or had inquired about whether we'd looked at the amount of green space for 237 Mowat Street, and the landscaped open space was calculated to be approximately 47% for the multi-unit. That's well over what most, I would say, typically you're going to ask for about 40% for a multi-unit dwelling landscape open space. So it is in keeping with a typical amount in the zoning bylaw requested for a multi-unit, and I think for a single it's 35% typically, and those are older bylaws numbers. More contemporary numbers might be even less landscaped open space. So it is in keeping with what you would find for multi-unit. No one has access, 0.3 meters to access their unit. As they had mentioned before, the building is set back 1.5 meters from the north property line. So there's room to get around there to get into your unit. It's just that there's the one unit, I believe, at the top that goes up the stairs, and it's the stairs that is the 0.3 meters. It's not the building where the setback was reduced.
Can you just, I'm sorry, can you just clarify that again so that it's not 0.3 meters, it's in fact a 1.5 meter setback?
The building itself is 1.5 meters. It's just there's an outdoor stairs to access the upper unit, and that's what's the 0.3 meters.
Okay.
Okay. And I think those are the main items that I believe Siobhan had outlined. Green space is an issue, I think, for her. And then Leah, again, she has a lot of issues with respect to fire safety. And as Tim pointed out, fire didn't have any issues, any comments.
Heritage issues, that was another point brought up.
It's not on the list of designated properties. It's not adjacent to any adjacent properties that are designated.
Okay, and a commercial vehicle being parked there, doesn't seem to be any enforcement?
Yeah, that's something maybe the city would better address than I.
Tim, yes, sorry.
Yes, through Mr. Chair. So the city runs on a complaint-driven basis. So if we receive a complaint in regards to a commercial vehicle or illegal parking, a ticket would be open, and a bylaw officer would go out on site and assess what is happening there. I'm unaware at this time if there's any existing or open tickets for the site, but again, if there's any illegal parking going on, it is up to the residents to contact us and to voice their concerns.
Okay, and James? Not at all. No, the public portion is closed. We're just addressing these. James?
Thanks, and through you, Chair, I do just want to add a couple more points to what's been said and raised tonight. So looking at the questions and building off what Ms. Ross has said, if you look at exhibit, just if you want to familiarize yourself, exhibit H in the report is the site plan for the retained parcel. That would be the apartment building. If you look at the top side of the apartment building, there is the part that is further away from the lot line. As you head towards the right on the drawing, it gets a little bit more narrow, and there's like a gray cobblestone area. That's the walkway to the back of the building. That demonstrates that the building is 1.5 meters set back from the lot line. And then there's almost like a brown section at the very right-hand side of the building. Those are stairs that step up back to the porch. So that's what we're talking about. The building is 1.5 meters from the lot line, and the stairs which access it are 0.3. Which means that those stairs are 1.2 meters wide, and the pathway is greater than 1.2 meters wide, which is what has been deemed by our fire department to be accessible for those purposes. Thinking ahead as well to the heritage aspect of the neighborhood. So this building isn't adjacent to any listed or designated buildings. Adjacent means a contiguous lot line, which would then trigger a heritage impact statement. There are buildings within the area that have heritage significance, but there was no trigger for that additional review. Looking towards the aspect of enforcement, so a Planning Act application is not an omnibus way to solve all matters of a property. So we have spoken with the individual before about speaking to enforcement should they wish to have the commercial vehicle looked at additionally. I don't know if that conversation has happened or not, but that would be the appropriate mechanism to follow up. And then in terms of fit with the neighborhood, if we look at exhibit, I think this is the one that displays it the best. It's the official plan schedule. That would be exhibit, sorry, they're not all labeled, exhibit D. It's a big yellow map in your package. If you look around the neighborhood on either side of Herbert Street, on the north side you have 257 Mowat, 7 Herbert, and 58 Hatter Street. Hatter, Mad, I just was corrected. It's the Mad Hatter Street.
Right.
Those 3 lots follow a very similar pattern of development as to what's being proposed here on the south side of the street with 243 Mowat, what is to be 6 Herbert, and then 48 Hatter Street. And looking at Mowat as well, the 261 Mowat, there's a larger parcel there too. So this proposal is in keeping with the fabric of the neighborhood by proposing a zone compliant single detached dwelling for the zone that would be there.
Okay. All right, there's another comment that the neighborhood is going to change, which could create increased dangers for people living there.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Neighborhoods are always changing. Every single detached dwelling within this area and row dwelling and semi-detached dwelling can actually have up to 3 units now in accordance with the city's zoning bylaw, because we do allow for second residential units and third residential units in a detached accessory building at the rear, subject to all the applicable zone provisions. We don't see the addition of one new lot here to accommodate another single detached dwelling as upending or destroying the fabric of this neighborhood when it's clear that this lot can accommodate the dwelling. There are services appropriate for it, and it represents the pattern of development that we've seen in this area before.
Okay, and there have been lots of neighborhood complaints and comments. People aren't happy with what's going on existing, and an example of that is certainly the parking out in front.
Yeah, through you, the parking issue out front of the building is an interesting one. We do have policies within the official plan which contemplate scenarios where we can be supportive of front yard parking. This front yard parking area has existed, but will be amended and modified as approved if this application is approved tonight because of the requirements for those streetscape improvements between the building of the multi-unit building and the roadway. So they specifically have to implement the improvements to that front yard area in order to gain the certificate of official. So that means consolidating the parking area and doing the planting and landscaping within that front yard area.
Okay, and I think this next one has been answered, but will the 1 yard be large enough for a building considering setbacks in the zone?
6 Herbert Street will definitely be large enough to accommodate a single detached dwelling. We don't have any minimum unit sizes in the new zoning bylaw. We have done away with that regressive policy in all of our new zoning bylaws. Regards to 237 Mowat, even accommodating one parking space per dwelling unit, the parking area and the building itself, in the drawing that's specifically appended to the application, there is a zone compliance table on it, and I believe it lists the landscaped open space at 53%, which is well above and beyond what we even see for apartment buildings within this area. So they can accommodate all the appropriate site needs, amenity area, and green space and functionality.
Okay. And has fire and this has kind of been answered, but I want to just be sure we've covered everything. Has fire and rescue have they chimed in on this, and do they agree that there's sufficient egress on all sides?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So fire and rescue Kingston Fire does comment on applications when circulated. They were circulated through the zoning bylaw amendment process and had no concerns with the application as proposed.
Okay. And there's a belief that we should be considering precedent because the existing property seems to be overpopulated per current zoning.
Thanks, and through you, Chair. This is a really interesting one. When the application originally came in, what really predicated the need for the zoning bylaw amendment was the fact that they were proposing 4 townhouse-style units on 6 Herbert Street.
Okay.
This property enjoys legal nonconforming status because of when it was built. So if the original application didn't start with that proposal, I would have directed the applicants to apply for a consent and minor variance, because even when you sever off a parcel from something that's legal nonconforming, the existing property doesn't lose its status as a legal nonconforming status. So what we could have actually done is applied a minor variance to reduce the interior side yard setback, which was ultimately approved through a zoning bylaw amendment, and condition the works to happen in that front yard through that process as well, and then just sever off the existing parcel. So instead of going through a rezoning process, this could have been done in a different manner, but we were so far down the zoning bylaw amendment process that we just chose to conclude with that application.
Okay. And this final one really touched a nerve with me. I did drive by the property today just to get a good close look, and the commercial vehicle parked out front. I mean, which one of these doesn't go with the other? It completely doesn't belong. What's the story on that? I mean, the comment was the commercial vehicle is not even related to the building. Apparently, they don't even live there. Like, what? Do we allow that?
Through you, Chair, where someone has their own business or works for a company, they are allowed to park their own vehicle within their own driveway if that is their company vehicle. So if someone works for Wentworth Landscaping and has a Wentworth Landscaping truck, they can park that in their driveway because that is their vehicle of choice.
Okay.
We'll have to take a look in an enforcement manner to deal with this truck, which seems to be lingering, even though I don't know if we've received a formal complaint through enforcement. So tonight I will work with enforcement and start that process.
Okay, thank you. And if I understand this correctly, when I look at the new site plan, that driveway that the truck is currently on now is going to be eliminated, correct? It's going to be seeded over and treed, so nobody can park there. Is that, am I reading that? I see. Carolyn?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, just to build off what Carolyn said, so looking at that exhibit, there will be significantly less vehicular area in this front yard for that type of vehicle to be accommodated, so there'll be limited space for that moving forward.
Okay, thanks for that. So committee members, do you have any questions for, any further follow-up questions at all? I'm seeing, oh yes, Vincent.
So I just want to make sure that the severance is exactly what it was historically before. It's not changing at all whatsoever.
Carolyn?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
We're putting it back to the way it was pre-2005.
Okay. Okay, so that's it. I'll turn it back to the committee and we'll get a motion on the floor and get this going. So moved by Paul and seconded by Vincent. So Paul. Any discussion? No. The only thing I want to say is I empathize with the neighbors. I was shocked to read a lot of the things that I read and to see a lot of the things that I saw when I not only just read the file, but when I did my site visit. What we're looking at tonight is the severance, the consent to sever, and it does satisfy all the criteria. I mean, personally, I see that it's a good planning application. It makes sense. It makes good use of the land, and it puts back what was always intended to be there. I mean, I owned another property just around the corner on Yonge Street so I'm familiar with the area quite intimately, and I just see this as being a good example of good planning. So I think staff, they've done a good job, certainly, and Carolyn, you've done a great job as well, I think addressing a lot of these concerns. Okay, any other comments or none? Okay, so I'll call for the vote. All in favor of this, raise your hand. And that's unanimously carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next application we have is for a minor variance, 1445 Kendall Avenue. And Lindsay, can I get you to read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance at 1445 Kendall Avenue. The file number is D13057-2022, and Tim Fisher will also give the presentation for this application.
Welcome back, Tim.
Hello, and thank you. Through Mr. Chair, this is a minor variance application for 1445 Kendall Avenue. The application is to reduce the minimum rear setback to construct a 11.7 square meter three-season sunroom on an existing 19 square meter deck at the rear of the single-family home. Next slide. As you can see, the subject property is adjacent to residential dwellings. This is a newer area of Kingston in Cataraqui North, or Cataraqui West, sorry. And the majority of the houses here are bungalows. The properties along Frank Street happen to be a little lower than the properties on Kendall Avenue. So this subject property actually has almost a walkout basement if you stand back there, and actually you can see in the photos that are upcoming how the grade actually changes. The main level extends quite a ways from finished grade in the rear yard. So it appears that it's quite an elevated deck, but that is only as a result of the grading itself. So next slide here, please. So the variance that we're looking at is the minimum rear setback. The requirement is 6 meters, so the house does comply with the 6 meter setback. However, the sunroom, which is considered an addition, regardless of it being heated or not heated, we look at a room that is going to be enclosed as an addition to the dwelling. And this is if it's a roof structure with windows or screens. So in this case, they are proposing 4.36 meters only for the area where the sunroom is located. So they can't in the future build another addition, let's say to the left side. So this is only for the addition itself. So the variance requested is 1.64 meters here. Next slide. So this is an aerial photo or an aerial drawing type of thing, and you can see in the photograph what I meant by almost a walkout basement. The elevation where the deck is located is right along the header of where the main floor is. So you could tell there's actually quite a bit of drop from the front of the house to the rear of the house. The site plan itself, you could see the area of the proposed unheated sunroom. The access from the dwelling is still being maintained through the patio doors. So the owners will be coming out of the patio door and then going into the sunroom itself, and the stairways that obviously currently exist there to access the grading. Next slide there, please. So this is a drawing of the rear elevation and the left elevation. It gives good context as to how high the structure is going to be located. and also the stairs themselves that access the deck. Next slide. So, notice of the public meeting was provided by advertisement in form of signs posted on the subject property 10 days in advance of the meeting. In addition, notices were sent by mail to a total number of 50 property owners, according to the last assessment roll, within 60 meters of the property here. And a courtesy notice was placed in the Kingston WIG standard. Next slide. I do want to note that we did receive one piece of correspondence from a neighbor, and their concerns were in regards to compliance with the setbacks and how they feel that any new development should be complying with the existing setbacks because of the smaller rear yards and the development that's currently there. The comments were provided to the applicant and also provided to the committee members prior to this meeting as well too. So the recommendation, the requested variance maintains the general intent and purpose of both the City of Kingston Fisher Plan and zoning bylaw 202262. The proposal is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land, building, or structure, and the requested variance is minor in nature. As such, the proposed application meets all four tests under subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, and the application is being recommended for approval subject to the proposed conditions. I leave this in your hands and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. So I'd like to call on the applicant to identify yourself by name and address, please.
Hello, my name is Milton Tingle. I'm at 1445 Kendall Avenue in Catarocta Woods.
Great, thanks and welcome. Is there anything further you want to add to the application?
I was just curious, I've never gone through them like this before. I was speaking, and I want to say thank you to you people and to the planning department who were outrageously helpful for me. I don't understand a lot of things like this. I worked in medicine my whole life. I never dealt with anything like this. The last thing, there was a man named Chris and Tim, and then the head of the department was Chris. He came down and spoke with me. They all took their time. They're fantastic. Regardless of the outcome, I thank you and I thank them. But what was confusing to me was Chris sat down with me at the planning department and said that the existing deck was permitted and we're building inside the deck. And the only reason I want this deck is I have a history of cancer on the face and ears, which was one case very serious. I also have multiple cases of bee stings where I just can't go outside and enjoy like everybody else. So I'm really trying to get a place where I can sit and enjoy. I've spoken to all my neighbors. They're quite confused as to why I got a bad letter, but like I say, everybody has a voice and I like to hear everything. I like to have it explained to me. I understand everything. But I'm just confused as to why the engineers said that it was being built on a permitted structure. I'm not arguing anything. I'm not trying to fight or be, evoke any bad feelings. Okay. But my neighbors who I've talked to are all very happy for me. I've done a lot of work on the house since I've come to Kingston. I retired back here. I grew up here. And all my neighbors have said the same thing. The rental was a horror. The property management did not do their jobs. I only found out about this. I did rectify everything that the neighbors had complained about. I built lawns, I built fence, I put up gates, I put up railings on the front patio where there were none. All the neighbors spoke to me about problems they had. Okay. I went and did everything as soon as I could and spent a bundle on this. I just want to keep everybody in the neighborhood happy. I love my neighborhood, I love my neighbors. We got along fantastic. And with or without a sunroom, I'm not moving, but that just limits what I can do as per conditions. Okay. And I'm really hoping people understand that.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for that. Okay, so committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or staff? I'm seeing none, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us this evening wishing to speak to the application for 1445 Kendall Avenue? Please raise your hand. And sir, if you want to come up to the third chair closest to you and just, that's fine, and tap the button and just give your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Michel Lorty.
Oh, just pull the mic up a little closer there.
My name is Michel Lorty. My address is 1449 Kendall Avenue.
Okay.
And it will be short. I was just coming here to be in support of the variance of 1445. And the reason why it doesn't do anything, like to disturb the environment, like no trees are being attacked, the grass is staying there and everything. And it's upgrade the value of the houses in the area and also the appearance, like of all the backyard and everything.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Okay, do we have any other members of the public with us wishing to speak to the application for 1445 Kendall Avenue? And there's nobody in the gallery and no, okay, everybody's shaking their heads no. So I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for, yeah. So moved by Blaine and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion? So all in favor, raise your physical hand, and that's unanimously carried. Thank you. All right, our next application, number E, minor variant, 636 MacDonnell Street. Lindsay, could you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is an application for minor variance at 636 MacDonnell Street. The file number is D13047-2022, and Sarah Oldenburger will give the presentation for this application.
Thank you. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, and through the chair, my name is Sarah, and this is a minor variance application for 636 MacDonnell Street. The purpose and effect of this application is to replace the existing covered or uncovered front porch and exterior stairs with a new covered front porch and exterior set of stairs. Next slide, please. The subject property is located on MacDonnell Street, north of Concession Street and south of 3rd Avenue and 3rd Avenue Park, as shown on these images on the slides. Next slide, please. A variance is required to replace the existing non-complying uncovered front porch and exterior stairs with a new covered front porch and uncovered exterior stairs, as the existing front porch does not meet the minimum front setback for a porch. The new front porch would be the same length and width as the existing porch, however, it will be covered with a roof, so a variance is required to facilitate the proposal. The variance requested is 1.1 meters. Next slide, please. Shown here is a site plan drawing which shows the proposed 4 by 8 foot front porch and a 5 by 10 foot roof and a zone compliant exterior stairs. The current proposal only includes the front porch and does not include the rear addition as shown on the site plan. The owner is looking into doing that at a later time but does not wish to include it in this proposal. Next slide, please. The elevation showed the east-facing covered front porch and exterior stairs. Again, as mentioned on the previous slide, the application does not include any rear addition, so just look at the parts highlighted in red. Next slide, please. Shown here are the floor plans for the main floor, which detail the new front porch as proposed. Next slide, please. One sign was posted on the property, 32 notices were mailed out, and an ad was placed in the Kingston Whig Standard. No comments have been received regarding this application. Next slide, please. The proposal meets all 4 tests under the Planning Act and is being recommended by staff for approval, subject to the proposed conditions in Exhibit A. I believe that the owner, Sam Brown, is here to answer any questions regarding this application, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. So do we have the applicant? Yes, if I could just get you to take a seat. Activate any mic there and just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Sam Brown. I live at 636 MacDonnell Street.
Okay, is there anything, welcome, and is there anything further you want to add to the application?
Yes, just going on what Sarah mentioned, I already have the building permit for the addition on the back. There was no concerns about that. The only concern that the building department brought up was for the front porch.
Okay, great, thanks very much. Committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Brown? See, did Jordan leave? Oh, okay.
Jordan's still there.
Okay. Oh, any questions at all? Any questions for the applicant? None
Not for me.
Okay, and so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us to speak, wishing to speak to the application for 636 MacDonnell Street? Raise your hand. There's nobody in the gallery, so I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for motion. So moved by Greg, seconded by Paul. Any discussion? So all in favor, raise your physical hands, and that is unanimously carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next file we have is number F, application for minor variance, 88 Helen Street. Lindsay, can you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance at 88 Helen Street. The file number is D13038-2022, and Sarah will also give the presentation for this application.
Welcome again.
Thank you, and through you again, Mr. Chair. This is an application for minor variance at 88 Helen Street. The purpose and effect of this application is to expand the existing single detached 1.5-story house through the construction of a second story, a 2-story rear addition, a covered front porch, and uncovered set of stairs, an exterior door and accompanying set of stairs on the south elevation, and and 2 uncovered rear decks. Next slide, please. The subject property is located on Helen Street, which is north of Mac Street and south of Carruthers Avenue, with Compton Park located just northeast of the property, as shown on the images on the slide. Next slide, please. Variances to the minimum exterior setback, the maximum surface area for all decks and porches, the minimum exterior setback for a front porch, and the minimum exterior setback for a rear deck are required to facilitate the proposal. Next slide, please. Shown here is the site plan drawing, which is also included in Exhibit F of the report. The site plan shows the addition of 2 rear decks, a covered front porch, and uncovered exterior stairs and landing to the south, and a 328 square foot rear addition. Next slide, please. So here's the east elevation, which details the second story addition, the covered front porch, and uncovered exterior stairs. This elevation also indicates the extent of the current house in dark gray. It's a little bit tricky to see on the slide, but hopefully you can tell it's just a little bit taller on the roof there. Next slide, please. Shown here on the south elevation is the second story addition, the rear 2-story addition, covered front porch and stairs, south exterior stairs and landing, and rear deck. So this slide more clearly shows the difference in the extent of the current house in dark gray. Next slide, please. The west elevation shows the second story addition, the 2-story rear addition and decks. And the elevation also shows the current house in dark gray. Next slide, please. The north elevation shows the second story addition, rear 2-story addition again, and the rest of the elements in the back. This elevation also shows the extent in the current house in dark gray as well. Next slide, please. All right, here are the floor plans. These are what would be proposed. So this would be for the main floor, the second floor, and the basement. And they detail the proposed changes to the dwelling, which would remain a single detached house. But these changes would increase the interior living space and the functional outdoor amenity area on the property for the current residents. Next slide, please. 2 signs were posted on the property, and 42 notices were mailed out, and an ad was placed in the Kingston Week Standard. No comments have been received regarding this application. Next slide, please. The proposal meets all 4 tests under the Planning Act and is being recommended by staff for approval, subject to the proposed conditions in Exhibit A. I believe that the applicant, Ashley Osmar from NBS Design Group, is here to answer any questions regarding the application, as well as I am too. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. So I'd now like to call on the applicant to identify yourself by name and address, please. Okay, I see Ashley Osmer. Ashley?
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Ashley Osmer. I'm the agent for the application, and my address is 77 Princess Street.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
Is there anything further you'd like to add to the application we have?
No, nothing further to Sarah's presentation, thank you, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, so committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or the agent or staff? Oh, yes, Greg.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, if you look at all the other houses on the street, will we be setting a new precedent with the design of this house? So if you've gone down Helen Street before, they're all kind of like one floor with the pointed roofs. And I am totally for development and growth. I'm just wondering, this is something new on this section of the street. I'm just wondering if staff has a comment about that, if staff noticed any other homes in the immediate vicinity that are similar to what's going to be built here. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Good question.
Thank you, and through the chair, if I may.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, there are no variances being requested for the height of the building nor the building depth. So the only variances that are being requested are for the exterior setback, which would be for the building as well as the porch and the decks. And the rest of the structure would be zone compliant. So staff are not concerned because basically the rest of the structure is completely zone compliant and it would be along the line of the existing house. So visually speaking, it would not be too distinct from the rest of the neighborhood in terms of what we could zone compliant as of right.
Okay, and James, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, thanks. And through you, Chair, just to build off what Ms. Olderberger's been saying, the variances before you tonight don't really change the building envelope. The exterior side yard setback is existing. They're just expanding along that exact same line. And every other home in the neighborhood does have the ability to expand up to have a 2-story building. So the zoning in this area isn't specific to the 1.5-story structure that there is. So there is a natural evolution that can happen in this neighborhood given the existing zone standards.
Good. All right, thanks. And Ashley, did you want to add to that, or are we okay?
Yeah, from a design, thank you. From a design perspective, we were mindful of that as well and had conversations with the owner about that. So we very intentionally and meaningfully approached this design to try and minimize the overall appearance on the neighborhood as it exists today, at the same time as meeting the requirements of the client from a design perspective.
Okay, thanks. Committee members, any other questions of the applicant or staff? I see none, so I'll go to the public portion of the meeting. And do we have any members of the public with us? There are none, so I'll bypass the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Greg and seconded by Blaine. Any discussion? So all in favor, raise your physical hand, and that is unanimously carried. Thank you. All right, So we've got number G, which is an application for minor variance, 917 Edward Riley Drive. Lindsay, can you read that into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our next application is for minor variance at 917 Edward Riley Drive, file number D13048, 2022. Jason Partridge will give the presentation.
Welcome, Jason.
Hello, through you, Mr. Chair. This is an application for 917 Edward Riley Drive, a minor variance application type. Next slide, please. Purpose and effect of the minor variance application is to request relief from the requirements regarding the rear yard setback provision to construct a 1-story, 3-season sunroom addition. Resulting new rear yard 3-season sunroom addition will be 10.78 square meters in size and complies with all minimum height, landscape open space requirements. Next slide, please. There's only one variance being requested, and that's for the rear yard setback. The requirement is 6 meters. The proposal is 3.18, and then the variance requested is 2.82 meters. Next slide, please. The subdivision is located in Cataract Ray North subdivision. It would be to the east of Centennial and west of Sydenham Road and just north of Princess Street, right in the middle. Next slide, please. So this is site plan 917 is the main structure and the picture, and the rear yard addition, three-season sunroom, is noted on the drawing below. Next slide, please. Requested variance maintains the general intent and purpose of the City of Kingston official plan and zoning bylaw number 2022-62. The proposal is desirable for their appropriate development or use of the land, building, or structure, and requested variance is minor in nature. As such, the proposal application meets all four tests under subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, and the application is being recommended for approval subject to the proposed conditions. Approval of this application will permit the construction of a rear yard three-season sunroom addition. Thank you very much. It's also important to note there was no public comments received through the Planning Department.
Great, thanks for that. So I'd like to call on the applicant or their agent to identify yourself, please, by name and address.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Syed Ahmed, representing 917 Riley.
Okay, welcome.
I'm sorry, it was cut off, yeah.
Okay.
And no further addition on my application. It was very well presented. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Ahmed? And I see none, so I'll turn to the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak to the application for 917 Edward Riley Drive? And we have no members of the public present at all, so I'll bypass that and come right to the committee for a motion. Moved by Blaine and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion? None, so all in favor, raise your physical hand, and that is unanimously carried. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, number H, application for minor variance 30 Stanley Street. Lindsay, could you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance at 30 Stanley Street, file number D13059-2022, and Jason will also give the presentation for this application.
Welcome back, Jason.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application, minor variance application for 30 Stanley Street. Next slide, please. Purpose and effect of the minor variance application is to request relief from the requirements regarding the minimum front yard setback and exterior stairs and another zone setback requirement to construct a front yard addition with new stairs. The resulting new front yard addition with stairs will be 3.5 square meters in size and complies with all minimum height and landscape open space requirements. Next slide, please. So there's two minor variants being requested here. One is for the stairs, the variance number 1. The requirement is 0.5 meters from the lot line. The proposed is 0 meters, and the variance requested is 0.5 meters. Second variance is for the front yard setback. The requirement is 1.9 meters. The proposed is 1.4 meters. The variance requested is 0.77 meters. Next slide, please. So 30 Stanley Street is to the west of Division Street and to the east of the Memorial Center, just right about in the middle there. Next slide, please. So this is a site plan associated with 30 Stanley Street minor variance. In the dark black coloring, it's the addition, and it's 3.5 square meters in size, and the stairs also in the front. It's also important to note the stairs do encroach onto city property. The engineering department has been circulated, and the notice of decision does reflect that they will need an encroachment permit through the building permit process. They've noted no concerns with that. Next slide, please. Requested variance maintains the general intent and purpose of both the City of Kingston official plan and zoning bylaw number 2022-62. The proposal is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land, building, or structure, and requested variance is minor in nature. As such, the proposal application meets all 4 tests of subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, and the application is being recommended for approval, subject to the proposed conditions. Approval of the application will permit the construction of a front yard addition with stairs. 30 Stanley Street. Also, there was no public comments received by the planning department for this application as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. I'd now like to call on the applicant or their agent to identify yourself by name and address, please. Yes, Mr. Nelson?
Hi, good evening. William Nelson, and I live at 30 Stanley Street.
And is there anything further you want to add to the application?
No, but I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or staff? I see none, so we'll look at the public portion of the meeting. Is anybody with us this evening to speak to 30 Stanley Street? And we have no members of the public, so I'll bypass the public portion of the meeting. Come back to the committee members for a motion moved by Greg and seconded by Blaine. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your physical hands, and that's unanimously carried. Thanks, Mr. Nelson. Number I, application for permission 42 Lower Union Street. Lindsay, can you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Up next is an application for permission, file number D13-025-2022 at 42 Lower Union Street. Anne-Marie Sabia will give the presentation.
Hi, Anne-Marie, welcome.
Hello, good evening. Good evening, Chair, members of the committee, staff, and members of the public. A permission application has been received for 42 Lower Union Street. The purpose and effect of this application is to request permission to construct a front dormer shed and a rear dormer shed onto the roof of the existing dwelling. Next slide, please. Subject property is located on lands that are not subject to the new Kingston zoning bylaw 2022-62. As such, the application will only be considered through the site-specific B179 zone under zoning bylaw 8499. This site-specific zone indicates that consent is required from council or the Committee of Adjustment to make any alterations to the existing building. As the proposed dormer sheds are considered an alteration to the existing dwelling, a permission application is required. Next slide, please. Subject property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and is within the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. Heritage approval is necessary prior to altering the property. On June 7, 2022, Council approved a heritage permit for the proposed rear dormer shed only. A separate heritage application for the front dormer is currently in review and requires Council approval. The heritage permit is anticipated to be presented to Council on December 6, 2022, and the owner applicant is required to obtain Council approval for the heritage permit for the front dormer. This has been included in a condition as indicated in Exhibit A of this report. Next slide, please. Subject property is located near Ontario Street and Gore Street. The existing dwelling is one of a series of 3 similar row houses along Lower Union Street that stand 2.5 stories in height. Surrounding residential uses include row houses, apartment buildings, and single-family dwellings, and the site is close to several public parks within walking distance, which include City Park, Anne Gordon Moore Park, and Navy Memorial Park. Next slide, please. Subject property is designated residential in the official plan, and the site, as I've mentioned, is located on lands that are not subject to zoning bylaw 2022-62. The site is located within a site-specific B-179 3-to-6 family dwelling zone in zoning bylaw 8499, and it should be noted that there are no dormer provisions contained within 3-to-6 family dwelling B zone or the site-specific B179 zone. Next slide, please. This is a site plan of showing the front dormer. The front dormer shed will have a length of 1.2 meters and a height of 3.0 meters. Next slide, please. The rear dormer shed will have a length of 3.6 meters and a height of 2.1 meters, and the proposed sheds are in keeping with the existing built form and height along Lower Union Street. Proposed dormer sheds at 42 Lower Union Street will have a similar design and scale as the dormers constructed at the neighboring property at 40 Lower Union Street. The subject dwelling is located approximately 9 meters away from the residential dwelling on the adjacent property situated at 157 King Street East, and the proposed dormers will not create undue adverse impacts such as privacy issues or intrusive overlook with respect to surrounding properties and the neighborhood. Proposed dormers will create additional living space for the residents. Next slide, please. With respect to public consultation, the signs posted on the subject site were posted 10 days in advance of the meeting. Notices were sent by mail to a total number of 18 properties within 60 meters of the subject property. Notice was placed in the Kingston Whig Standard, and to date, no correspondence has been received. Next slide, please. The requested application for permission is consistent with the general intent and purpose of both the City of Kingston Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw 8499, and the proposed construction of the dormer sheds onto the existing dwelling represents appropriate and desirable development of the subject property. The application is recommended for approval and subject to the proposed conditions. The owner, Linda Holmes, is also here tonight. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks very much. At this point, I'd like to call on the owner to identify him or herself by name and address, please. Linda Holmes?
Oh, hi. It's Andrew Green and Linda Holmes. We own the property at Lower Union. We live right now in Toronto at 1 Aldbury Gardens, Toronto, Ontario.
Okay, thanks very much and welcome. Is there anything further you wish to add to the application?
I guess just we both grew up in Kingston and we want to move back. And so we kind of moved away in our mid-20s to work, and now we want to move back. And the dormers, we bought into Sydenham Ward because we just love the area. And we want to make it's one of those cottage ones, so it's not super large. So we just want to make some extra room to, so our kids can come back and visit, hopefully, and our grandkids one day, potentially.
Okay, great stuff. All right, committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or staff? I see none, so I'll look to the public portion of the meeting. And do we have any members of the public wishing to speak to the application for 42 Lower Union Street? And there are none in the gallery, so I'll bypass the public portion of the meeting and call for a motion. So it's moved by Vincent and seconded by Blaine. Vincent and then Blaine. And any discussion? I don't see any. So all in favor, raise your physical hands. And that is unanimously carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, and our last one is number J, which is an application for minor variance, 4016 Bath Road. Lindsay, take it away.
Through you, Mr. Chair, our last application for tonight is an application for minor variance, file number D13060-2022 at 4016 Bath Road. Amy Didrikson will give the presentation for this application.
Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Through the chair, the purpose and effect of this application is to reduce the minimum rear yard setback and minimum water body setback of the Kingston zoning bylaw to permit the enclosure of a portion of a second-story elevated rear deck for use as a three-season sunroom at 4016 Bath Road. Next slide, please. So the property is located on the south side of Bath Road along the shoreline of Collins Bay. It's currently developed with a single detached house. The existing dwelling has a walkout basement at the rear with a small sunroom at grade, which will be retained. The property is designated residential and is located in the UR1A zone of the Kingston zoning bylaw. The property is adjacent to single detached dwellings to the east and the west. Next slide, please. These images illustrate the location of the second-story rear deck and the covered area proposed to be enclosed. The elevated deck received a previous minor variance approval in 2021 for relief from zoning bylaw 7626 in effect at that time. Since this approval, the owner decided that they wish to enclose the area shaded in black for a 3-season sunroom, which does require relief from the Kingston zoning bylaw. It's important to highlight that the sunroom will not project closer to the rear of the property or the water than the existing at-grade sunroom that was shown on the previous slide. And I wanted to highlight also that the dimensions and the support design of the elevated deck have not changed. The building area is subject to the minimum rear yard setback requirements for the main building, which is 7.5 meters in the UR1 zone. And a greater setback than is required for an elevated deck. The setback cannot be met based on the dimensions of the approved deck and the lot, and as a result, a variance is required from the setback. In addition, since the 2021 minor variance was approved, the Kingston zoning bylaw has come into effect, and it includes a 30-meter minimum setback from a water body to protect the ribbon of life in accordance with the official plan. Next slide, please. So these elevations, at the top, there's the elevated deck that was previously approved with a covered area, and below there's an elevation illustrating the enclosed portion under the roof as part of this application. Next slide, please.
Looks so much better.
These are the two variances required, and with respect to the second variance, I just wanted to highlight that the proposal upholds the policy objectives in 3.9.2 of the official plan for the ribbon of life, including objectives such as minimizing soil erosion. Staff and the Conservation Authority have reviewed the proposal, and similar to their conclusion with respect to the 2021 variance, they've relayed that the sunroom is not anticipated to have any impact on the overall health of the shoreline ecosystem. Next slide, please. Just some details on the public notice provided in accordance with the Planning Act, and no public correspondence has been received. Next slide. The staff recommendation is summarized here. The application meets the 4 tests of a minor variance as detailed in the staff report. The application will provide for additional amenity for the single detached house on the property without resulting in any adverse effects on the waterfront or adjacent properties. I'm happy to answer any questions. I believe the applicant, Bill Somerville, is also in attendance. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. So I'd like to call on the applicant now to identify yourself by name and address for the record, please.
My name is James Somerville at 4016 Bath Road, Kingston.
All right, welcome. Is there anything further, Mr. Somerville, you want to add to the application?
I believe Amy has covered everything.
Okay, thanks very much. Committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Somerville or staff? And I see a bunch of no shaking heads, so I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any members of the public with us wishing to speak to the application for 4016 Bath Road? And there are no members of the public present, so I'll bypass that. Come back to the committee for a motion. So moved by Blaine and seconded by Jordan. Any discussion? I see none. So all in favor, raise your physical hand. And that's unanimously carried. Thanks very much. Yep, and that's that. All right, moving along our agenda, we have no motions this evening or notices of motion, no pieces of other business. There was one piece of correspondence received from D. Workman regarding 1445 Kendall Avenue, and that I think we all saw that was part of the schedule. Date of the next meeting is Monday, December 12th. So it's in 3 weeks, not 4, and it's at 5:30 p.m. So now we need a motion to adjourn. So moved, oh, hang on a sec, Paul, you had a question? You had your hand up?
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wanted to confirm, I went back through my records, and I think my appointment to the Committee of Adjustment was to November 14, 2022. And I'm just not sure, is this the final meeting tonight?
Yeah, Ian can address that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is a bit of a weird one because of the way the election took place and when the new council is being sworn in. So the new council comes into effect tomorrow in this very room. And as there isn't quite enough time between the coming in of the new council, the formation of new committees, and then the appointment of new committee members, the current committee will continue until the December meeting. So the December 12th meeting will be your last committee meeting of this current iteration of the Committee of Adjustment, and the new one should be in place for January.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, motion to adjourn. So moved by Blaine and seconded by Jordan. Any discussion? None. All in favor, raise your physical hand. And it's unanimously agreed. Meeting adjourned at 7:59 p.m. Thanks, everybody.